You understand what I mean? Maybe you don't. I mean, I think the art of mentoring is a celebration of all that we were designed for, but haven't been met there in a long time.
That's it again. That's a good summary.
Yeah.
Okay? It's a celebration of all that the human being was designed to receive in the life experience, but we haven't had that opportunity in a long, long time. We're designed for something. My favorite explanation of it was Bill Hill from Scotland, and I don't remember exactly where Bill is from in Scotland. I believe it might be Glasgow, but he worked for Adobe, the font company, and became a font expert. And he started on the streets as a street musician, and he came from a really poor background. And then he discovered like a meditation process and practice. And he and his wife Tanya, who's an incredible artist, sort of lived this life that was really quite celebratory of nature and the connection to nature. But Bill ended up in the font business, and then he was recruited to Microsoft. They came over and got him, and then they brought him to the U.S., and I met him there in Washington State. And he dropped his daughter off in the morning and then left, and then would come back and pick her up in the evening. And that was how we interacted for a while, until one day he drove her to one of our workshops in his open Jeep with no roof on it. He dropped her off, and then it started to pour down rain, like buckets. So he realized that he wasn't really meant to drive away this time, and so he actually stayed and listened. And he was really deeply touched by something that was said during that workshop. And he was right in the middle of researching fonts, F-O-N-T-S. And he said to us, not during that workshop, but later, he said that the job of a good font is to disappear. You know? He said, if you pick up a book and start reading a book and you become conscious of the fonts, we've already lost. Right? You shouldn't even know there is such a thing as a font. You should pick up the book, enter into the experience, and find yourself slipping through that book like a downhill sled ride. You know, the first few pages will be a bit as your brain starts to gear up. But once you engage, the words disappear, the pages disappear, and you go on a visual, mental journey that has smells and tastes and emotions and feelings, and you'll even sweat, he said. You know, you'll notice your own smells from your body as you get drawn into the story so deeply, and you'll come popping out the back end of the book. He says, that's a good font. Right? And he actually did research on something called the magic of reading. His paper, which he presented all over the world, was The Magic of Reading. And he said, my favorite line that came out of that was, he stands in front of the Microsoft community, all these high-tech people from all over the world who are absolutely brilliant, right? He's just talking to this massive audience, and he says, how many of you would run the wrong operating system on your hardware? And, of course, they all just kind of laugh. Right? He says, but that's exactly what we're doing. You know? And he's talking about the human being. He says, this being was designed for a very specific interaction with the world. And we would never think, ever think, you guys all laugh at how ridiculous it is that we run the wrong operating system on the hardware that it wasn't designed for. But that's exactly what we do as human beings in this modern life. You know, we're running the wrong software and operating system on this hardware. This hardware was designed for something. You know, and he put that out there in such a strong way. And I sat and listened to that lecture over and over and over again, and I was just so completely in agreement. You know, the art of mentoring is about understanding the operating system for the hardware that we were given. It's that basic. It's that ergonomic. It's right back to the grabbing because you're designed to grab. Okay? Which is completely unsatisfying for those of you who are looking for some philosophical or conceptual framework to grab and shake. You know, you can throw it down and fight with it and wrestle with it all you want. You're not going to find it. There was an anthropologist who was working with the Kalahari Bushmen, and he was convinced that they were hiding their worldview from him. He was convinced of it. So he was trying to get them to understand that he wanted to know what their sort of religious beliefs were about the universe. He wanted to understand what they understood and what they knew. And he asked them so many different ways And they just looked at him blankly, like they just didn't understand what he was saying. So he started telling them stories and explaining something, and one of them said, "Oh, I think I know what you're after now." So after weeks and months of getting to know these people and building relationships, he finally gets one of them to say, "Oh, I think I know what you mean." So he says, "Well, okay, tell me, what is your worldview?" So this man sits and explains this beautiful, cohesive worldview to this guy. It's a whole framework and a story, and it all fits together in like this cosmological thing, right? So he's like, "Oh, great, you got it, you nailed it, And he says, but please come back this afternoon and ask me again because it will change. And as this afternoon I probably won't have that same framework. I'll have an entirely different one. And then tomorrow, ask me in the morning again because I'm sure it will be different, And the guy got so frustrated because what he really wanted to know was that they were hanging on to some belief structure just like he was. But they don't hang on to anything because it means nothing to hang on to something like that. Why would you hang on to something like that? It's completely useless. In their world, it has no value whatsoever, which he really could not get his mind around, right? So why do I talk about those people? It has nothing to do with you at all, does it? We're not in the Kalahari. We've got plenty of water, don't we? We're not having a water shortage right now. At least my shoes believe so, on the way over here. Why would I tell you about the Kalahari Bushmen? How is that relevant? Yes? They're an example of a kind of pure culture which is quickly disappearing, so it won't be there for long. What else? What else do the Kalahari Bushmen have to teach us? Who are they? Yes? Yeah, thank you. They've got the same hardware as we do. What else? Let's go on that. Yeah? They were, and especially in the time of that story I just told you, they were living directly off the land. There's nothing in between. Yeah? Strongly connected to their ancestry, for sure. Yeah?
They're watching the land change constantly. They're watching the nature.
Yeah, you're saying. Okay, you're saying they're watching the land change constantly, but they're more than watching it, right? It's more like a fish in the water of change, constant, right? They're not watching. Well, I'll give you some more examples in a minute. They're so fully involved in the sensory experience of the land changing constantly. There's nothing between them and that experience. The change is happening, which is them. They are the change that's constantly happening. Come on, there's something even more crucial here. Yes?
They live in not only a dynamic, but also an egalitarian and classless society.
Yes.
In which a fixed worldview, which is sustained and reinforced by some kind of principle, is just, well, thank goodness for them, at least at that stage, was not on the agenda.
Yeah.
Which has basically destroyed most of the rest of the world.
Right, very good. Well said. So that's a good description of the complexity that we've made of life, not them, that we've made, right? And there's layers and all this kind of class stuff and politics and all kinds of weird things that have risen out of all of this. But there's something even more crucial to this story that I'm digging for. Yes?
They've remained fully in their heart and in love with nature.
They are fully in their heart and in love with nature. I would agree with that. Yeah?
They're living in connection and unity.
Connection and unity. No separation. Good. These are all true statements. There's something even more crucial to this story from a historical standpoint.
We originated there.
Yes,
As
we
species.
are descended from the same people they are. Our ancestors were there in that very place. Bushmen who were there are in such unity with the land that there's this extraordinary back and forth relationship between the people and the land there that is almost mystifying. Right? It's like you cannot get your head around what's going on there because it's not happening in the head. And they're not doing it in the head either. They're fully in their being, and their minds are used for humor. They use their brains to tell stories and to have fun with each other and to joke and to laugh. And the expression of their consciousness that they most revere is humor. Right? So if you're with them, you're looking back at something and you're thinking to yourself, what does this mean and why is this relevant? If I could capture the essence of what the Bushmen have going on in a bottle and I could distribute it out without you knowing, and get you to swim in it for a couple of days, it would be really healing for you. And we would call it the art of mentoring. And what it would be doing is going underneath your consciousness and putting the software in and the operating system in that you were designed to receive, and magic would occur from that exactly because it was working with your design. Like a good font, you'll go seamlessly into experience and pop out the back end. Right? It'll disappear if it's done well. Are you with me on that now? You see why I used that example? So, what is the operating system designed for? And after this, I will lay some framework down. What is the operating system designed for? It seems to be designed for some very primary things. It's designed, number one, for you to have a full sensory experience. You know, these are the things that are operating in the background the entire time I'm speaking from here on. So I'll always defer to this list that I'm giving to you right now as I speak. But number one, the entire experience is designed to encourage, enhance, celebrate, and feed and re-stimulate a dynamic sensory experience. All your senses. But we have no control over your habits and patterns up to this point. So if you've been a very visual person up to this point, we can't fully save you from that experience because you have, like, if you're 40, you have 40 years of momentum behind it. 40 years of habit is hard to break, right? So, but you are designed to have a full dynamic sensory system. So the person who came up with the idea that there's visual learners and there's kinesthetic learners was really separating us unnecessarily. You're all kinesthetic learners. You're all visual learners. You're all olfactory learners, which isn't one of the learners, by the way. You know what I mean? It's not one of the things that they list, but you're designed to have all your senses fully stimulated. And engaged, meaningfully. Meaningful engagement with all senses is the second layer. Meaningful engagement with all senses, which means that you're not just hearing a sound, you're hearing a sound in a highly dimensional context that has meaning. Can I give you an example? When I ask the Bushman women a question, 5 of them answer me at the same time. They're all looking at me and they're all talking to me at the exact same time in their language, and nothing wrong with that. None of them feel like the other one's stepping on them. They don't feel like they're being rude because they're completely capable of understanding 5 conversations coming at them at the same time. So when they get together and talk, they all talk at once. And you would think that it's total chaos, but they're actually tracking each other's conversations brilliantly because they are using their full dynamic capacity as auditory people. You want my favorite example? I don't know, Phil, if you were here for this week or if this was when you weren't with Robin Bliss Wagner, were you? Robin Bliss Wagner? No, you weren't there for that. You were with Anna Breitenbach. Okay, so here's this old Bushman named Gutta. Okay, he's bent over and he's doing something over here, and he's working, and the women are talking, and the translator's translating, and there's someone over here talking to them. And so Robin Bliss Wagner's over here, and he's watching Gutta, and he's watching me, and I'm standing here watching this. And there's something happening over here, and there's a little bird alarm going off in the bush, maybe 30 feet back behind over here, okay? So Gutta's over here doing this, and then Robin says, "Do you hear that to me in English?" And I say, "Yeah." And we have to wait for the translation to finish. So the bird alarm stops. Gutta's really busy like this. He's talking in his language. And Robin says to the translator, "Franz, can you please ask Gutta what kind of bird alarm is going on behind him?" And Gutta hears it, and he just starts speaking. He says, "That was a mongoose." You know, and he just continues, right? Doesn't even break stride. He was tracking a conversation that seemed to be really intense and fully engaging, and he was tracking a mongoose with his ears at the same time. Is he amazing?
Yeah.
But is he?
We'll touch
Come on. Are you with me?
Yeah.
That's your operating system. That's not him being amazing. That's your operating system. Are you with me now? That's how primary art of mentoring is. Yes, you can do that. You're designed to do that. And if you just do it, you'll find that you can do it. But you won't just do it. And we know that. Because of all of the habits that have been sort of beaten into us literally, I think, quite literally, from way back when. You literally had to beat humans to get them out of those patterns that Buddha was born to have. Are you with me on that now? Okay, so here's how cool we are. This is how cool we are. My daughter, Willa, is 5 now, but when she was 3, she was sitting in a hot tub in Portland, Oregon. And she's sitting in the hot tub, and she's got her back to a big cedar tree that has a branch leaning on a roof. And we're in a city, and there's helicopters flying because it's traffic hour, so the traffic helicopters are flying over downtown Portland. Sirens are going off. Cars are going by just, from here to where that door is. Cars are charging by on a road, and there's a little thin wooden fence there. It's loud, this place. Okay, it's assaulting on your senses. Willa's sitting in a hot tub early in the morning, up to her chin, and she's got a plastic hamburger that's hollow. That's part of some toy set, I guess some kitchen set and she's got it floating in front of her. And she's got this other little thing on top of it, which I think was like a piece of broccoli or something, a plastic broccoli. And she's got a whole world going on about a ship and about a little person, and the broccoli's the person, and the hamburger's the ship, and she's going on this whole journey. And I'm sitting in the tub with her, but I'm sitting on this angle, so I can see behind her, and I can see the roof, and I can see the cedar tree, and she's having a whole conversation with her broccoli and her hamburger. And the steam is rising around her, and the noise is all over the city, and a junco flies in and lands on the roof right at the gutter, and it goes, and then it flies off. Okay? So I wait 5 minutes, and then I said, Willa, we should go now, because we had to go somewhere that day, but she's not going to leave her ship and her person in this world that she's in. And I say, come on, we have to go now. Let's have fun getting out of the tub here. Come on, we got to go. She's like, doesn't answer me. She just stares at her little hamburger. And, come on, darling. I don't want to have to yell at you. Let's go. So she continues to ignore me. So I say to her, Willa, if you come quickly, maybe we'll get some ice cream when we're done walking today. And she goes like this. So I know she's hearing everything I'm saying to her, right? And I said, Bah, I will only give you ice cream if you can tell me where the junco gave its alarm. And she goes like this. And points exactly at where that junco gave its alarm. That's what we're designed to do. Now, is she amazing? Yes. But aren't we all? You know what I'm saying? That's you I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Willa or Guto. I'm talking about you. That's your operating system. What happens between Willa's age and adulthood in our world is that we are, little by little, shuffled away from that potential. And we are just narrowed and compressed and disconnected and disconnected and disconnected and disconnected and disconnected until we become these isolated units. And all we have left is the need to believe. So belief systems matter when there's nothing left of your sensory dynamic connection. You need that stuff because it keeps you sane in an otherwise insane world. How many of you believe the world just might be insane, especially the way it's going? Okay? Don't let go of that. It might just be insane. Humans might just be completely out of control and completely insane. They might. That's really possible. I have evidence to support that. You would never run the wrong operating system on your hardware. You just wouldn't do it. It just won't work right. You would never do it. An extreme example, you get a Macintosh and you try and clear it and put PC software and operating system on it. That would be like heresy. People would be like, why did you do that? They would think you were doing it like to make a statement or to have some kind of artistic experience. Right? And people would come and pay to actually look at the results in a museum, and they'd all laugh. Right? But that's exactly what we're doing. It's exactly how we're living. And we're just doing it without even thinking about it.
If you didn't know it was the wrong operating system, like if you just, so someone said his computer is an operating system,
load this up.
Yeah.
I didn't know the difference. Like, I wouldn't know the difference.
It's exactly right. I mean, that's the whole thing. We don't know that that's happened to us, right? And, you know, it wasn't your parents who did it to you. And it wasn't the teachers who did it to you because someone did it to them. You see? And then, so who did it to them? So just keep following that backwards and following it backwards and see where it goes. See where it goes. And you'll find always a violent moment where one culture destroys another and then takes it over in this form of slavery and then creates this mess that never heals. And now it's called mainstream. and if you're with it, you're responsible. That's my favorite thing. Right? And everyone's just complicit, totally complicit. It's just got this giant momentum. You know? And I'm so irresponsible and irrational for even saying that to you right now. So forgive me, I'm just kidding. Anyway, back to the model. Back to the model. Are you ready? The model behind the scenes is really just essentially us rebooting the human operating system. You know, we're essentially, you guys get here, we plug a DVD in, it kind of goes ring in the background, and then all this stuff starts happening. But it's happening from underneath, and it's going like this. So I'm just going to lay out the engineering of the model right now. We've got some work to do. So the archetypes. You know, we were looking for a basket by which we could collect and store and utilize operating system components. And it was too hard to store them. You guys know what Legos are? Do you have Legos here? Okay, so if you think about each cultural element, part of the operating system as a Lego, and we take a box that a washing machine comes in, cardboard box. They used to come in cardboard boxes, and my favorite thing was when my parents got a new appliance and we would get the box as kids, right? So picture the box. Fill it with Legos to the top. From every Lego set you've ever seen, anywhere you've ever been on planet Earth. Put Legos in this box until they're full, so it's a complete chaotic mess. And if you got one of those like Star Wars Lego sets where you could make the Millennium Falcon, you know, it's in there, but only half of the parts are in there, so it's all in a box. So if you were a little kid and you really wanted to make the Millennium Falcon, you'd be so frustrated. You'd never be able to do it. But here's this box of Legos. Each Lego has the potential, if I pull it out and give it to you and you use it as a nature connection opportunity, that little tool, to reboot your operating system. That's what we were doing for years. We were collecting cool Legos for human operating system reboot. We kept throwing it in the Lego box, but what we found out was when we would go to a new community to teach them, we'd reach in the box, and we would just take the ones in the top all the time. So there was Legos down here that never saw the light of day. And maybe they were really needed, but we couldn't get to them. So we were trying to figure out a way to sort everything so that the Legos would get used regularly, and the ones that were way down here would come out regularly. Because otherwise you pour them on the floor and there's this big mountain of Legos and nobody knows what to do with them. That's what this was for. That's why we created it. We needed a way to sort this material. There's no religion behind it. You get it? It was like a practical need. We needed some way to organize ourselves. Everybody got that? There's no belief system behind it. We needed to organize ourselves. So we thought, Ingwe got really mad with me. And Ingwe's of British ancestry, so you'll appreciate that probably a little bit. He says to me, I had sorted it all and started to list it all in this long list. Roman numeral 1, capital letter A, small number 1, and I had, like something like 27 categories, 27 Roman numerals, which, by the way, I didn't know how to do that. I had to go look up Roman numerals and try to figure out what to do with this to be able to number things. He says, well, show me what you've collected. Show me what you've got. So I brought it all out. In 1984, we're sitting there, we're going through this list. And he looks at me and he says, that's bloody ridiculous, he said. I'm like, why? He says, you're using Roman numerals to sort this stuff. I said, well, what else would I use? Don't use Roman numerals. They're the ones who bloody caused the problem in the first place. Right? I said, what should I do? He says, let's do what all Native people have always done, including our ancestors. Let's organize according to the 4 directions instead. Yeah? Cool, wasn't it? That was a primary decision he made that completely altered the future of how we did things. Because he was right. We were using a divide and conquer method that was disunifying, that was actually deliberately gridding out and destroying the intricacy and the magic of how all these pieces work together. And what he said was, unify it. Put it back in a framework which is spherical and multidimensional, so that the synergies will just multiply without us even knowing about it. He was sensitive enough to understand that, because he was raised among the Akamba people. He was raised as a medicine man among the Akamba people in Kenya from 1920 until he left, after Kenya declared its independence. He had insights into how this stuff worked. So he simply said, set it up according to the 4 directions and let it sort itself out. And yes, this is northeast, but it also points up. This is southwest, but it points down. And it's important for you to realize that, because now you're looking at 3 dimensions, not 2. So it's the x, y, and z axis. And we literally decided that that's what we would use it as, the x, y, and z axis.
What about the other?
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't work, because there's no other dimension. So we didn't have it for a long time, so we were only 6 shields for a long time.
What dimension of time?
I know. Teasing you, Alex. There was a woman in Seattle named Jen Wolfe, who's a visual artist, who kept looking at our diagram and saying that it looked really weird because it was missing something and that we really needed to put that something in there. And she said this during an art of mentoring. So it could have been here. It could have been this group of people. Just like Alex said, what about the dimension of time? She was just irritated that there was something missing off of our chart. We're like, but there's nothing missing, Jen, because what are you talking about? We've got east, south, west, north. You could all point to those up and down. Like, there's nothing else to put on there, She's like, but it looks weird. So finally we said, okay, listen. She came to 2 or 3 art of mentorings and kept irritating us on this. So we literally just drew the line one day.
A dotted line.
Yeah, that's right, it was dotted. It was a different color also. So she says, that's much better. So a woman in the back raises her hand, Pam Hawes. She raises her hand. Yes? She says, what does it mean? Literally. She thought that we were hiding the meaning of it from her. I said, I have no idea what it means. I just drew it. You tell me what it means. And that's how this thing grew, from discussions just like this. Right? Teenagers gave us this, told us what the feelings were, and the archetypes were basically, we really wanted it to be as primary as grabbing. We didn't want there to be any deep philosophical stuff behind it. We wanted it to be super primary. So that's what lies behind it. Totally ergonomic, totally primary. So it wasn't until we got to Hawaii that the Hawaiians told us what this other axis was, because they had it going in their culture. Past, present, future. And all of us in this room are right here at the center. So each of us is at the center of our own intersection of those lines. It just describes where you are. But it also describes where the whole group is. It becomes the organizational principle behind everything we're doing. So now, the other thing we know is that east is sunrise, and that west is sunset. And for the northern hemisphere, things move in this direction. They move in a sunwise direction. Thankfully, all my life they have. And if that changed suddenly, wind would be the least of our worries, right? So we're glad that it's always done that, aren't we? I'm thankful for that. That's a really small thing to be thankful for, but it's really big. It goes like that. Can everyone get behind that? Yes. I think you can imagine what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. The sun rises in the east and it moves to the south, and then after midday it moves to the west. And then it goes down below the horizon, but if you could keep pointing at it, it would be moving to the north. And then in the morning it would be coming from the northeast and then rising in the east. And this time of year, what's really cool about the northern hemisphere this far north is that you can really see the sun rising in the northeast in the high summer. And you can see it rising way down in the southeast in the midwinter. You can really see that. So, we also know that summer is the south, because the light is very much in the south. That determines what summer is, and the north is very much the winter, and there's really no problem with that. If you go far enough north here, you'll hit the land of eternal winter, right? You can kind of get your mind around this stuff. It's really primary. But remember, the equator flips the whole thing upside down. When you go to the other side of the planet, when we teach down in the tip of South Africa, it's very hard to teach this for me, because my brain is so patterned on the northern hemisphere. When I go to talk, it's very hard to talk about this whole thing going in the opposite direction. But know that it does. When you go down below the lower half of the earth, the whole thing flips upside down. The sun still rises in the east and sets in the west, but then the wheel turns in the opposite direction. We're not going to deal with that at all. That's as far as we're going on that concept. Just know that it works on the other side in a mirror way. So here, it's all about growth externally. Here, it's all about strengthening internally. Build fibers internally to make strong for what? For the seeds, well, yeah, if it wants to be tall so it can blow in the wind and the seeds can fly off. What else? What are these plants preparing for? Why are they building strength at this side internally? To fruit. They're getting ready for winter. They're getting ready for the hard times ahead. They need to have strength and structure to make it through the tough times ahead. It's internal development, internal strengthening on this part of the wheel. Internal strengthening. And then over here is the autumn. The first frost is happening in here somewhere. And then comes the winter, where everything goes dormant and quiet. But dormant isn't dead, is it? One of my favorite stories is when those botanists took the seeds that they had found inside of the pyramids that were in these clay vessels for thousands of years, and they sprouted at a 30% germination rate. 30 out of 100 seeds were viable after thousands of years. That's the north. That's cool, isn't it? I love that. It's really cool. And then over here is where the seed gets water and germinates. So the northeast is that point where dormancy can spring back into life. So plants go through this cycle every year, and it's a miniature life and death cycle. Right? Some plants are annuals, which means that they do this whole thing and then they're gone somewhere in here and only their seeds making around. Some plants, like oak trees, perennials, they go through this, and what's happening is that life and death is happening at the ends of their branches. And new life is being born at the ends of their branches, and they keep growing out from there. Right? So in the east, with humans, as you find the color, I'll write it in later, but the east is birth. The east is the sunrise, when the head crowns, and it looks a little bit like sunrise. So I'll just stay with green.
Okay.
So let's call it east is the birth moment. So if you go back from birth, just east of the northeast moment is germination for humans, which I forgot what it's called.
Conception.
Conception, thank you. Conception is happening just east of northeast. Thank you. Oh, yeah, right on. Beautiful. Okay. So we got birth in the east. We've got conception just east of northeast. And then we've got the time of rapid external growth, which I think you can get behind me on this. If you haven't seen your niece or your nephew in 4 years, and they were 3 the last time you see them, you're kind of like, whoa, right? 4 years goes by. If you've been busy in your life doing the same thing every day, the 4 years doesn't seem to go by. But when you look at the children, they're just going, right? When do they stop going? Because you can't just keep doing that, because if you keep growing and growing and growing, you'll be 25 feet tall, and you'll just fall over in the wind. When does that stop? Help me.
Late teens.
When did you stop?
Early 20s.
You seem like you're still going.
I don't know. Maybe I am. 18, 19, some 6, 17.
So we can just sort of put a range. Adolescence. Thank you. So we'll just put it right here. Adolescence. So, the number is going to change. Adolescence. The number's going to change from individual to individual, but can we just say it sort of is roughly 18-ish? You okay with that? South, directly south. It's the moment of the solstice when the external growth stops happening. Okay? That's what I'm looking for. That's the correspondence we're looking for. When does the human stop shooting up like a plant in time-lapse photography? Right when they stop. That's that point. And that point is always accompanied by other things, isn't it? Adolescence, puberty, physical changes that are also shifting into the internal, and now we move into internal strengthening in the life cycle. So let's just say this is roughly 18, therefore this is 0 for a human. Then what's this halfway point for southeast? This is important for you to think about. Yeah, but give me a number. 0, 9. It's the quintessential 9-year-old. The southeast is such a 9-year-old, it's not even funny. And you'll see that. Coyote's Guide, by the way, is designed, the whole book is designed to meet these numbers with their archetypal value. So if you're running south tools, you're running tools that adolescents really respond to. What happens if you use them on adults? Can you predict something? You'll re-stimulate their adolescence archetype. Their adolescent will come back up again. If there's unfinished business from adolescence, what happens? It will show up. It will be repeated. It will come to the surface because it wants to be dealt with. Because it wasn't dealt with when adolescence happened the first time. Which means if you didn't get the nourishment that the 9-year-old needed when they were 9, and you run 9-year-old tools, that 9-year-old will show up really wanting something, really hungry, really longing, really intense. Because the amazing thing is, I don't care if you're 50 and you've got 5 PhDs. If your 9-year-old wasn't attended to, you still need that. And that's not my law. That's not my rule. That's just what is. And that's what art of mentoring has taught us over 30 years. I can't change that. But what you have to do if you're serving adults is make the 9-year-old stuff seem really adult. You have to roughly meet adults where they're at and let them think that this is very mature and responsible of us, and that there's a plan and a pattern and a bunch of things that they can write down and control and have ideas about and discussions. But the whole time you're doing that, what you're trying to do is bring along the 9-year-old and awaken their 9-year-old, because if you can get the 9-year-old to wake up, you can feed that 9-year-old, and all of a sudden they'll grow spiritually to another level. The whole time, their adults will have this intense trauma going on, and all kinds of arguments and frustrations and problems, and this is what's wrong with this program. And, all that stuff will come up, right? And guess who bears the brunt of that? Lauren. Maeve. It's Mark Morey's fault.
There's a great gift, right, that comes with re-stimulating unfinished business. So in the Southeast, it's the word play, playful, curiosity. And you can even hear it in Rupert's talk around what it is that breaks a habit. Going from unconscious to conscious. So there is a whole adult application to something. It's not relegated to the childhood. Like you open up unfinished business and you put it away. You get this enormous gift into being a vibrant, curious human being, integrated. Otherwise, imagine being an adult without a very active curiosity. What's your life like? I mean, you can imagine that, right? So going back, you're kind of like going back and collecting all the original gems that's part of healthy development. And it really changes the possibility of being a human being.
Alex, you were sneaking up.
I just an observation, maybe a thought that just came to my mind was that I think when you take a group of adults and you create a learning environment for them where they are doing something which is, like you say, speaking to a childhood type learning mode, that's one approach. But another approach is if you put adults in the care of children, then and you create a safe environment for adults to work with 9-year-olds, you'll find that they'll need to adapt to that mode of communication.
That's right.
without necessarily having to kind of create it artificially
Yeah,
for themselves.
exactly right.
Yeah.
That's very well. See, that's applying the design. You know, that's good. That's good design application right there. What you just shared with us. You know, you're basically jumping way ahead in the lecture, Alex. I see you one day up here,
And
without a
that's-
fiddle.
and
What's
that's
that?
why having your own children will bring up stuff.
Definitely.
At each stage.
Oh, you bet.
It's so immersive.
Right. This is called stacking the deck, by the way. Okay. This is something we leverage at the Art of Mentoring because, and by the way, the Art of Mentoring is a total ridiculous pain in the butt, and it should never be done, but we do it anyway. Okay. Like, this is a really dumb thing to do. For all the reasons you just said. You know. But we do it anyway because it gives us a chance to dance with something and reflect on it and go like, yeah, right. Right? We couldn't have this conversation if we didn't try to do